Alrighty, let's go ahead and get started. So yes, welcome to everybody again. If this is your first time tuning in, this is the Ascend Data Friday, episode 3. Today we'll be talking about secure data feeds, or as we like to call it in our product, secure data access. All right, can anybody see the screen that I'm sharing? Perfect. Cool. So quick introduction. We like to do this every week for some of our first-time viewers. My name's Andy. I'm currently a PM here at Ascend. Previously, I had more of a data engineering, machine learning engineer position at a previous company.
Yep, and my name is Jove. I'm a solution architect at Ascend here. Before joining Ascend, I was at a company called Cubo and HP Autonomy. Did a lot of data and Spark and Hadoop on AWS.
Awesome, thanks, Jove. Yeah, and so with these Ascend Data Fridays, for any of our repeating viewers, the structure is the same. So the goal is to talk about this problem from a data engineering perspective first, then discuss more about the challenges of what makes it a problem. Then we'll talk about some approaches, our approach here at Ascend, hopefully go over a demo. And then finally we have a fire round, which is our Q&A session. Cool.
Awesome, let's get it rolling.
Right, so one thing I want to remind everyone of is, I know Joe briefly talked about this last week, but secure data access is part of our Ascend Govern functionality. So Ascend Govern is something we just released on March 24th. We call it the final element of our unified data engineering platform. Essentially, it's the user experience layer that abstracts away a lot of the complexity of our managed Spark, access controls, et cetera, into very easy to use features. Yeah, so I know that if this is your first time tuning in, feel free to tune into last week's where Jove talked about data lineage and some of the cool aspects of how we've integrated data lineage into Ascend Govern. Cool, so diving into this week's topic, sharing data is a pretty common challenge across data teams, software teams, et cetera, et cetera. And as Jove mentioned earlier, as the size of our data grows and the variety of data sources grows, it becomes more and more difficult to create a simple to use and easy to understand system for sharing that data. So some of the challenges that we've seen across people that we've talked to, whether it be customers, prospects, friends, is some of these things that we've listed here. So a lot of the times, data engineering teams will usually create data sets, clean them, tailor them for a data science team, right? And that data science team can do whatever sort of analysis and modeling they want to on top of that. Secondly, we also see that third-party BI tools, data visualization platforms, these are all examples of places that we would like to ultimately send clean data sets at the end of the day. And then finally, we see that data pipeline building nowadays usually involves many series of steps, right? And you never want to build these steps sequentially, mainly because it can take a long time, especially if you have a lot of transformations linked to your data set, a lot of joins, et cetera, et cetera. So being able to define points in time during a data's lineage that other people can build off of becomes really powerful when you want to emphasize collaboration for data engineering and stuff like that. And so ultimately, we came across, I guess, this macro level challenge, which is, how might we share data across both platforms and pipelines in order to enable a simple and robust system for data access? Cool. So after looking at these challenges, Jove and I went out there and talked to people about like, what are you currently doing? What are some current options out there in the market for you to, add structure to your data access? So the very common approach nowadays is to use data warehouses. And cloud data warehouses seem pretty new, but the whole concept of warehousing is definitely not a new topic. It's been around for some 40, 50 years. And data warehousing itself, in principle, is very, very nice. You take your highly structured data, it's fully labeled, and you stick it in somewhere that becomes a source of truth. And that source of truth can then serve your data science team, your BI team, your data analysts. And some of these warehousing solutions nowadays are optimized for crazy query speeds. They become super robust. You'll never lose your data or anything like that. So they're really able to emphasize both of these aspects of query performance and also being that centralized source of truth. But some of the challenges that we've seen with these data warehousing is that storaging can get pretty out of hand as you adjust column names here, add a column here, remove a column there. Some of these warehouses do pretty well with this versioning, but because storage and cost are associated linearly with most of these data warehouses, you have to have someone who can keep that warehouse clean, organized, structured, et cetera, et cetera. And then the second common option that we see is the DIY approach. So a lot of companies who choose not to use a data warehouse or start off with just a very small amount of data will start off with a DIY approach, which is defining their own system of this is where I'm going to put all of my really structured data, and data science team analysts just look at this specific prefix in S3 or maybe this specific database, and that's where you're going to find all the data that you're going to need for your day-to-day activity. So the positives around this are pretty obvious, right? It's customizable because you're defining the system yourself, and more importantly, it's free, right?
Well, actually, free just from a software perspective, not from a time perspective, right?
Right. And that's exactly what leads into some of the cons around this, which is, similar to having like a Scrum Master or something like that. Usually you end up having to have some sort of like data system master. And so you have to have someone to ensure that this system is followed to a T by everyone in the company. And that can usually cause issues when people leave. You'll have knowledge transfer issues, and someone's going to come in and say, hey, I want to rewrite this system, but there's a lack of flexibility around redefining a huge DIY system that's already pretty ingrained across teams.
Yeah, and I think before we move on, like one other point I want to mention here is I think, like Andy, these two options you mentioned are truly for sharing a huge amount of data, right? I mean, not just for like a sample data set. Because like me, for example, if I were to share a sample data set with someone, I'll just make a copy of this, frankly, put it in somewhere that someone can access, right? Maybe FTP,
right.
S3. I mean, yeah, here you go. The data is over there.
Right,
I mean,
right.
the pros of that, obviously, it's like fast and dirty. Well, dirty is a pros here in this regards. But the con is I can't really share a huge amount of data because I mean my copy job is going to take forever and it could fail in the middle, and then it will take me forever to make the copy. And also when the data changes, I actually cannot be responsible to making sure the copy I share with Andy is up to date all the time as well. But I mean, for smaller data that definitely works. That's exactly what I do all the time too. Still, something I don't want to admit.
But I think you definitely bring up a great point, which is that we're not talking about the I have a CSV file with 100,000 records that I want to train on, and I can just email it to you, right? We're talking about situations where let's say you're a credit card company, right, and you have a lot of sensitive information in that data. So you can't just send it over email. It's probably iffy if you just stick it in some sort of cloud source or something like that. Or we're also, talking about situations in which you just have a huge amount of data and you want to create that live connection of, when this column updates upstream, I want that actual final data set that I read off of to also be updated after the processing is done. Yeah, great point. Cool. So moving back, so after we saw all these challenges, here at Ascend, we are building out our declarative data pipeline network, our unified data engineering platform, whatever you like to call it. And we started to see that a data feed itself is really more just a logical connection between a data set producer and a data set consumer. And if we define that logical connection in an easy to use way, we're able to achieve a lot of the solutions that would help with some of these aforementioned challenges. So we came up with this feature known as secure data feeds. So what we guarantee with our secure data feeds is that data across teams and organizations can easily be shared in a safe and secure manner, while also ensuring that keeping that logical link will maintain data lineage and integrity as you either grow out the number of steps or components in your data pipelines, or just simply over time as you keep on running more and more data through that pipeline itself. So another benefit that we realized is that given a single Ascend platform, you'll inherently create a data catalog of all of these data feeds for data scientists, for other people to just explore. And this becomes really, really useful when you're trying to answer maybe a problem around revenue data, and you just really want to be able to pull in marketing numbers super quickly, rather than actually having to go and ping someone and see, hey, can you build this out for me in a week? You can just check the data catalog, the data vault, and see if someone's already done this before, and it's importing it in at the click of a button. And then finally, we realized that this was a great way, the data feeds themselves, to integrate external tools with our platform. Because ultimately, our mission here is to help people make data-driven business decisions a lot easier, a lot faster. And a lot of these decisions come out of BI tools, whether it be Looker, Tableau, et cetera, et cetera. Cool. So that's a quick overview of the secure data feed. And now I'd really like to demo it to you all, because we're all engineers in the end, and we want to see this stuff actually work. So what I have here is your typical Ascend data flow. So this is a view of our platform itself. This may look very similar to like a generic data pipeline when you look at it from left to right. I'm bringing data in, which are these blue boxes, blue components, as we call them right over here. We do a series of transformations related to that data. Over here, they're all SQL based. And then ultimately down here is the data feed that I was talking about, which is where I essentially publish whatever is immediately downstream of that data. So we take a look at the context of this problem right here. Like, let's imagine I'm some sort of cab or rideshare company, and I have a bunch of data in S3 related to what are all of the rides that my drivers have been doing over time. So I have some pickup times, I have some drop-off times, and I want to see if I can do some sort of analysis over this ride data. And one question I want to ask is, does the weather affect overall revenue or something like that? So I can also go in and create another source and pull in weather data from an API, which is what's going on over here. And I'm able to get relatively up-to-date weather data. And then so ultimately what we're doing down here as a data engineering team is we're cleaning this data, we're joining it together. And then ultimately what we have here is we're able to do an inner join between the clean weather data and some of the cab information related to pickup date, payment type, total amount. And then what we have here is a very nice tailored data set that a data science team can go then and use and do some sort of analysis off of and stuff like that. So, as a data engineer, once I'm done, I would just publish a data feed here. And essentially this creates a logical flow and tells everybody else inside of Ascend and even whatever integrations we have outside of Ascend, hey, my data is ready. It's ready to use, ready for anyone to explore, and anybody else can subscribe to it. So I'll first go over what happens inside of the Ascend platform itself.
Yeah, so now I'm sorry to interrupt, but now I'm super interested in seeing, let's say I'm a data scientist, data analyst, right? So I don't know how to access the weather API. I don't know how to get to the raw data for the cab, but I'm just interested in that canonical data set. My data engineer promised that they're going to deliver for me, right? So now what is my view? Like, how do I see that?
Yeah, so the data catalog that I mentioned before, right, is something that is inherently built and ready to use in the background. So if I add any sort of data feed connector, essentially what I will see here is all of the available data feeds inside of my Ascend platform that are made available to me. So you can obviously share this with specific teams or share it with anyone who has access to the platform. But I can take a look here and see that, oh, we have some stuff related to Airtable, some sales data, insurance data, et cetera, et cetera. And this becomes really, really useful when you're a data scientist and you just want to see if there's any additional features or labels that you can join with your current data set.
So in other words, I can actually just go shop for data, like how I go shop for toilet paper on Amazon.
Exactly.
Can I see some review of this data set too? Like, hey, somebody like make a comment on, hey, this data set is awesome. I'm just gonna subscribe to that as well.
Unfortunately, there's no social media functionality associated with data yet. But you can explore at least who's using your data. And I honestly find this part pretty interesting. When you're a data engineer, you publish something and you come back to it a couple weeks later and you see, oh, hey, I have a data analyst named Judy and a data analyst named John who've both done their own cool things off of this data feed. So if I just quickly open these up in separate tabs, we can actually go forth and take a look at what they've done relative to the data that we've published. So we take a look at, this is data analyst Judy's data flow. And it looks like Judy has, written a little bit of SQL to ultimately get to some data around the daily rides versus, I'm presuming, what is the total amounts earned. Yeah, the sum of the total amount of money earned. Interesting. So it looks like she focused more on just the ride information itself and didn't even use the weather data. So this is a great way for allowing, analysts or people who just, know a little bit of SQL, a little bit of Python, to go forth and explore the data itself. And the cool part is that this data flow itself is independent of, John's data flow, who also subscribed to the same data feed. And let's take a look at what John built. Well, it looks like John only has one transform, and well, John is a little bit lazy. He just selects start everything, and has his own data flow. So hopefully, as he continues to build out here, that'll become a much more full-fledged data pipeline.
So now when the dataset got created once by the data engineer and it got subscribed twice by two different data analysts, so then effectively, was my underlying data actually copied 3 times?
No. So the cool part here is that we have a shared data layer underneath the whole platform itself. And so I briefly talked before about like the whole logical link idea. So Ascend itself works in terms of partitions, data partitions. So we can identify whenever a data partition is shared across teams, across data pipelines. And that's what makes it really cost efficient to do this sort of data sharing and capability like that. And also from a time point of view, like you said, there's no reprocessing done or copying when the sharing is actually happening.
So if there's no copying, then when the source actually updates, right? Let's say there's a new day's worth of data coming in for taxi and the weather. Will John and Judy pick up those changes too?
Yeah, exactly. So, right here, I just refreshed this weather API source, and you can immediately see that all the stuff that's downstream of it is now in a waiting state as we go forth and check the API to see, oh, is there any new data here? Do we actually need to do any sort of recomputation and stuff like that? So if I go back to, Judy's data flow, I'll see that her data flow has actually responded to this update. And after the refresh, I guess data itself hasn't changed. So we saw that everything is now up to date, including Judy's data flow itself.
Oh, so I can literally refresh by clicking on the refresh button. Awesome. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's one example of, a pretty straightforward data engineer, data science, data analyst interaction here inside of Ascend. But with the increasing discussion around usable machine learning, I'm going to quickly go over another example where we can help data science teams themselves actually play around with more specific training data sets and stuff like that using the same data feed functionality. So over here, we have just a quick example of someone who's actually doing some linear regression modeling inside of Ascend itself. So they have 3 separate machine learning pipelines, and they're all different based off of their data size, right? We call them a tiny, tiny data set, a small data set, and a full data set. If you look at the differences, it's about 100x, 1000x between each one. And so essentially what's happening here is we have some natality data, which is data related to the birth of newborns. And the question that we're trying to answer is based off of some features around the mother and the father of a baby, can we predict the weight of the baby upon birth? So this weight pounds is the label that is the column that we're choosing to predict for. So as a data scientist, I can do some basic feature selection and, choose, maybe what I first want to train off of is whether the baby is a male, the weeks in gestation, the age of the mother, age of the father, and just, do all sorts of training here and build that model. But the cool thing is that, once my features are ready, I can actually go forth and create a data feed off of it. And this data feed will essentially allow me to go forth and share this data with the rest of my data science team so that anybody else can go forth and do their own modeling. So very similar to what we saw with the data analysts previously. We see that over here, we have another data scientist who's actually gone forth and built their own training pipeline. And it looks like the difference here is that they've actually gone and included a couple other different features, including cigarette use and alcohol use from the mother. So this becomes a really cool way in which you can pose a single, machine learning question to your entire data science team and just have as many people as possible attempt to answer it in a much more efficient manner. Cool. So that's pretty much it for our demo here today around secure data feeds. Hopefully that gave you a little bit of insight into some of the example use cases that we've seen in being able to share data across teams and across organizations. So just moving back to our slides, I'd like to wrap this up and say that when we look at secure data feeds, what we're ultimately seeing is that we're able to use a single unified data platform to serve multiple personas: data scientists, data analysts, BI, and data engineers. And then some of the nice features that come along with the data feeds themselves is like what we showed, is that data automatically propagates through data feeds itself and across different pipelines. You have out-of-the-box integrations with your BI tool. And this is a little hint towards next week, where we'll be demoing, our Looker integration. And then finally, yes, the data catalog. So actually, I think I missed showing the out-of-the-box integrations that I was talking about. So one thing with all of these data feeds is that if you take a look at our tabs here, is we have a data integrations tab. So this is where you would integrate your application layer on top of Ascend. So over here, you can see Tableau, Power BI, and next week, you'll see a quick demo of Looker. And then we also have some more programmatic ways to access your data, whether it be through a Python SDK, so you can easily read data inside of your Jupyter notebook, or something known as our structured data lake, which you can definitely read more about inside of our documentation. But essentially, it is a S3-like API over our own data layer so that you can actually read all of the data partitions that Ascend generates and Ascend uses.
Wait, so this means if I'm even way lazier than your data analyst, John, and I don't even want to do anything in Ascend at all, I could just fire up my Tableau and then create a visualization on that data set right away, right?
Exactly. And this actually helps you not have to stage that data in a sort of like warehousing solution. The big question that I think a lot of people have asked me before is, should I just use a direct integration of my data into Looker, into Tableau, or should I, stick it into a warehouse first and then put it into my BI tool after that? And the thing I usually tell them is it ultimately just depends on what your use case for that data set is. It's nice to have that direct integration when you know that that's the final destination for your data, but sometimes the warehousing is nice if you want to be more flexible and stuff like that.
Well, and I think it's important to think about when data updates, what happens as well. Because I mean, if I store the data in their warehouse, then it's kind of like my job to keep that data up to date, right, in the data warehouse as well.
Right. I think you always bring up a good point in terms of, what is the manpower associated with all of this, and that's very, very difficult to quantify.
Well, if I have two teams of engineers.
To keep in mind. Yeah, exactly. Cool. And that brings us to the last part of our Ascend Data Fridays. So we like to call this part the Fire Round, which is a quick Q&A session with you, our viewers. And this is a good place for you to ask any questions about the demo itself, any questions about any sort of current data projects that you're working on, and yeah, really anything. So just shoot your questions on over. Again, this is the first time we're trying out YouTube Live, so there might be a slight delay on our end with questions as they file in. Yeah.
So we have one question. Can you specify specific people to share the data with, or can everyone see the data feeds?
Yes, great question. So let's go over an example of creating a data feed itself. So if we go back to my shared screen, we can, how do I switch over to a shared screen? Perfect, cool. So if we try to build a data feed off of this component right here, I right click, I can hit create new data feed. And so all of this stuff is pre-populated for you, but you'll be able to see this permission settings section. So all teams and all data services can access this data feed. That essentially means that this data is going to be public to anyone inside of my Ascend environment, but I can also select specific teams to access this. And so this becomes really nice if, say, you're a data scientist and only want to share it with other data scientists or stuff like that.
Cool, thanks, Andy. I don't see another question, but I think we're actually 1 minute over time already.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah. We'll have to cut off the questioning here then. Yeah, thank you everybody for tuning in this week. Here is, if you have any remaining questions around this demo, if you have any ideas for further topics that we can discuss in later episodes, feel free to drop either me or Jove an email. Very, very simple, jove@ascend.io and andy@ascend.io. We're always happy to talk about, whatever data projects and data challenges you're working on or facing today. Yeah. Jove, anything else you want to add?
With that, thank you very much, everybody. Jove Kwang and Andy Data Feed Wang checking out.
All right, thank you, everyone.
See you next week.
Yeah. See you next week.